Hello, Nick Ritter back for another Cavalry tutorial. Today I'm going to make the social media tag animations, but we're only going to animate one of them, and then using dynamic rendering, it'll render out the rest of them. It's a pretty cool feature. Let's get started. This time I'm not starting with a completely blank canvas. I have my background color. I do not like those squares. And then data. This is a group that I created, and this has these 4 elements in here. There's icons. And these are using the FontAwesome. You do need the FontAwesome font installed on your machine. At fontawesome.com/start, you can click on Start. You scroll down under Other Ways to Use. You click on Desktop. And this will take you to the Download FontAwesome. You might have to restart Cavalry when you install a new font. You can search for Facebook, for instance. And I'm using the Facebook-Square. There's an Instagram-Square, LinkedIn. I think all of them have a square version. I just liked how it's a consistent shape for all of them. So you click in on one of these, click here on this icon to copy it. Let me actually set up a text layer so I can show you what's going on. I'll take the icons and pipe that into this text shape under text, and then set this to FontAwesome. I'll go brands, and then turn this white just for kicks and giggles. Maybe make this a little bit bigger. Change the alignment to center, the vertical align to middle. And there we go. We got the Twitter icon coming in from the icons text array. So icons and handles here, those are both text arrays. You can just open up your search and type text array. And the shortcut to get to the search is Control period. But once you have the text array open, luckily the FontAwesome icons show up in here, so thank you Cavalry for building that in. And then I have my handles down here, so this is my Twitter handle, my Instagram handle, and then my YouTube name. And then I also have the colors that I looked up for each of the platforms. So here's the official Twitter blue color, the official YouTube red, which is just red. And then here's the magenta color I picked from Instagram. They've got a lot of colors, so I just picked one of them. So I've got my 3 arrays. The color array is right here. So when you create one of these, the auto index is automatically checked. Uncheck it. And then I created this value element and piped that on over to the array index of each of my arrays. So now when I change this value from, okay, well, I can't change the value yet. This dynamic index, we'll get there in a second. I'm going to delete that for now so I can change the number here. So when I change it to 1, you'll see the icon updates to the Instagram. Change it to 2, updates to YouTube. Let's also pipe the colors into our text shape here. Go to fill color. Whenever we change this value of our platform select value element, it changes the color and the icon. And you can add as many of these as you want. One other thing to set up for best results in this is this little field over here. There's no label on it, but it's your project manager. Right now I have it hooked up to my tutorials folder, but let's go ahead and create a new one. You click create. I've got a folder here called 05 social. With that folder selected, I'll click choose, and then everything is set up. When you go to your file explorer, I had created this images folder before, but I don't need it, so I'll delete that. It creates all these folders for you. So I'll pull this back open. Name 05 social, that's the name of the folder. It created a scenes folder for us right here. It created a renders folder right there. It created assets right there, autosave there. Well, this will be nice because when we do our dynamic render, it'll render it right to this renders folder. Okay, so we have our data. And I like to group all these things together and just call it data so I can like hide it out of the way. So let's create the other text layer so I can just reference that real quick. So I'll call this one icons, and I'll call this one handle, just singular icon. And then in the handles text array, I'll drag this over to handle, pipe it into the text. Now you can see my Instagram icon, the color, and my handle. That'll be all that we do with data for the time being. Next thing, I want to change the composition settings. So at the top right of our scene window, there's this little button with these sliders on there. You click that, and that pulls open your composition settings. You can click this button to pull it out and move it around. I'm going to keep the width to 1920. I am going to change the height to about 250. Let's even go to 60. And then the end frame, I'll change that to 30 for now. May change that later. So let's drag our icon over this away. We will try to line this up. Oh, I need to center it and middle it. We will align these things more precisely in a little bit, but for now we're just doing our general layout. So we've got the icon, we've got the text. I'm gonna change the text to a darker gray color. I already have one set up here in my scene palette. So I'll pipe that into my handle, click on fill color, and look at that. It's the same thing as my background, which is fine. We'll have a text box behind it. Hold down Alt, click the rectangle tool, and that creates a square right in the middle of our composition. Resize this to be a little bit bigger than the icon. Pull this underneath. And then change the color here to white. So if you hold down Alt and double click on an element, it'll make it so that's the only element visible in the attribute editor. Under radius, corner radius, I'll increase that. Oh, okay, so when you click on those handles, it changes the scale, not the width and the height. So I'm going to reset this back to 1 and 1, and then resize it with the width and the height. Resize it to about like so, and then increase the radius. So I want it to look like it matches what the FontAwesome icon already has. That looks pretty good. And then while I'm at it, pull up in this handle, and I'm going to change this to maybe just bold. So this is the basic layout. I'll rename this one to text box. Select all of these, Control G to group them, click and then enter to rename. And I'll rename this design. The next thing I'm going to do is rig this both for animation and for a dynamic render. I'll show you what I mean. Currently, our text box is this size. It comfortably fits our icon and our handle text right here. But when I pull open the data folder, platform select, and change this number from 1 back to 0, it doesn't work. In fact, that reminded me the handle, I do want that one to be left aligned, but it still doesn't work because the text box stays the same size. And we want Cavalry to know to resize this based on the text that's inside. So we're going to rig this up to do just that. And maybe for a little bit of context, let's look at the render manager. Under File, go to Render Manager or Control B. If we go to the Dynamic tab, you check this Dynamic Render box and you tell it, I want to do 3 renders. So we've got Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. 3 things. So it'll do the render and then it'll increase the dynamic index by 1. So do the first render and that's 0. It'll do the second render and that's 1. It'll do the third render and it'll change that to 2. So what you can do, you'll see this little connection point. Connect this dynamic index up to your platform select value. The index information will pipe straight into our value and automatically change the icon, the color, the text. But that's how you can get all those changes to refer to one number. And conveniently, the value also starts at 0. Then it will go to 1 and it'll go to 2. Okay, so I'll close out of that. And I'll break this connection again because it'll be nice to switch from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, just to make sure that our rig is working. So the first thing I'll create is a JS math. I think this stands for JavaScript math. So if you're coming from After Effects and you do expressions, this is using a similar idea. Currently, the expression says 2 plus 2. I'm going to change that first 2 to N0. And you can see what the result is live right here. What the N0 does is it refers to the first number. So this is number 0, N0, and there it is in our equation. And currently it's 0 plus 2, which equals 2. I can change this number to 2. And when I hover over it, you can see that I can animate this number. And I can add N1. And so when I click to add one more, it's back to 2. I can change this N1 number to 3. So it does N0, which is 2, plus N1, which is 3. And the result is 5. So the JS math is useful for us because ultimately we want this text box to be the width of our icon plus the width of our text plus the padding around it. The icon doesn't butt up right against the edge of our white text box. There's a little bit of padding in between the two. So that'll be a number that we'll need to account for. For the time being though, I'll just say N0 plus N1. And so we'll say that this will be our icon. There's no way to rename it. I'm on version 1.0.3. So the question is how do you get the width of an element? If you've seen my text box tutorial, You'll already know the answer to this, but I'm going to go over it again. Let's create something called a bounding box. 2 of them. This first one we'll call icon box. The second one we'll call handle box. So this icon element right here, make this a little smaller. I'm going to pipe this element into our icon box. Click on input shape and do the same thing with handle. Click and drag, input shape. Now clicking on icon box and handle box, you'll see that it's getting size data and position data from those 2 elements. So this is how you get the width or the height of a particular element. So back in our JS element, we are worried about the width specifically. So let's pipe the width of the icon into number 0, and then we'll pipe the width of our handle into number 1. The final step is to connect our JS math node to our text box. So I'll click and drag, come down here to size, width. I'll open up our platform select, change the value from 0 to 1. You'll see it resizes. It's not looking quite right yet, but it does resize. And that's exactly what we want. So a couple problems. One, it's still not sizing large enough to see the whole text. The second problem is that it's growing in width from the center. We need to align our text box to the left to make sure that it stays there all the time and that it only expands on the right-hand side. And luckily in Cavalry, this is super easy. I'll open up the text box, and under Deformers, hit the plus button, click on Align. We'll open up our Align dialog box here, and then slide the text over to the right. Change our position back over to where we want it. And now when we change our platform select value, our box stays on the left and only changes on the right. Let's fix the sizing issue. Now, there's a couple different ways to do this. The first one is to expand the box. We can expand how big our icon, or shrink it for that matter. We can also expand or shrink the handle box. That is a perfectly valid way to do it. I don't find that as useful. So what I'm going to do is add 2 more JS math numbers. And sticking with our pattern, we'll do icon padding, text padding. So we have N0 plus N1, and we'll do plus N2 times 2, and then plus N3 times 2. So what this says is we set the padding on one side, and then it'll calculate that it should have equal padding on the other side. Click here, and I believe the padding for that icon was something like 15. And then this number, I'll just click and drag it until it looks like it's about in the middle. We'll change our platform select to make sure that works. Okay, fantastic. So now it's rigged for the dynamic rendering. However, it's not rigged for the animation, and I'll show you why. We want to animate the width of our size, but we can't animate it when it's getting its data from some other node. At least we can't animate it directly. Here's the fix. N0 and N2 are icon numbers. So I'll just keep those together. So we've got our 2 icon numbers and our 2 handle numbers. So what we'll do is around the handle text, because the handle part is the thing that will be changing size. That's the part that will animate out. So I will type in N4 multiplied by open parentheses, and we'll do a close parentheses at the very end. I'll add my other element, and we'll see that this is working. We don't have quite enough padding, so I'll drag that out a little bit. Looks like we're at 18. That looks about right. And when I drag this from 0 to 1, you can see that this is the thing that will animate. So let's do that now. I'll click on the start keyframe. Oh, we'll go about 12 frames. Change that to 1. You can also double click a keyframe and change it wherever you are. I just forget that's a feature sometimes. And then while I'm at it, I'll go in the graph editor and just make this sexy. When you're dragging these handles around, you hold down Shift. So you can snap it horizontal or vertical. But lots and lots of easing there at the end, and then a little bit of easing at the beginning. Very nice. Okay, so that's our animation rigging. I will click on these 3 items here, Control G to group them together, click and enter. I'll name this to rigging. Okay, the graph editor window went black. That happens sometimes. It's a bug. I'm sure it's on their list. I just click on time editor and back to graph editor. It'll go away. Back in the time editor, I'm going to move these keyframes over to about frame 8. The next thing to animate is this icon. Alt, double click on icon. I'll pipe together the scale X to Y. That way I'm just setting up one keyframe. And click on the keyframe button. Move 3, add new keyframe. Move another 3, add new keyframe. You can press Control Alt left arrow or Command Option left arrow or right arrow to move back and forth between keyframes. I'll move to beginning, set that to 0. Move to the middle and set that to about 1.2. This gives us a little bit of overshoot before settling back into the final size. As I scrub through this, you can see that our text box is doing some funky stuff. And that's because we're animating the size of our icon to change, which changes the width of our text box. It doesn't change the height though. Yeah, it gets a little crazy. I don't want to see the white text box though until we get to about this point here. So you can just click and drag the beginning of the text box to this point, and then here's the other piece that we're going to animate. Back in the JS node, 18 is our padding for the left and right hand side of our text box around the icon. I'm going to animate this number. So I'll click on that keyframe, move this up to frame 6, I think. And then at this point, we'll make it -5 works for me here. As we scrub through this, it's not perfect, but in motion, I don't think you'll really notice. And that way the white just suddenly appears and then it slides out. Under Scale, Graph Editor, just set these two to have some easing. Hold down Shift and then just make some curves that look like they'll work nicely for us. That's a little bit of funkiness with the white color. That's easy to change though. Go to the time editor and grab this number 2, go into the graph editor, add some interpolation here, and that should line up pretty well, and then it animates out like this. But you'll notice that here we have transparency, here we have white. It's my preference to just keep transparency there. I think it's interesting. So I'll show you how to set up the transparency of the white text box. We also need to set up a mask for our text, because currently the text still shows up. It's the same color as our background, so you can't see it here, but the text does still show up. But these are both pretty easy. We'll take care of the text first. The text box, just pipe that into our handle text. Under masks, connect to new index, just like that. It does set the text box to automatically hide, so just click that back on and you'll see the text box again, and as it animates out, it reveals our handle text. The next thing is to add transparency where this icon is. I'll go to the end of the icon animation, about frame 8 on my timeline. Alt click to create a square, drag that over here, resize that to roughly cover where the icons will be. I'll just call it matte. I put it in our design group. We'll make matte a child of icon, so that way it animates with it. And then I will connect matte to the text box. Under masks, connect to new index. But now the text box is only showing up where that mask is. We'll double click on the text box under mask and change it to subtract. And now we have transparency where that icon is. And that transparency animates with our icon. Turn back on our background layer. So now we have our full animation set up. And I'll just click through the data and make sure that they all work. Platform select. Change the value back to 0, click play, change this to 1, play. Awesome. So you get the same animation no matter how wide the text is. Pretty cool. But the last thing to do is to open up our render manager. I will rename this to social tag. Under format, I'll change this to animated GIF or GIF, depending on who you are and what you believe in. Make sure the dynamic render is turned on. 3 elements, click render queue. Behind the scenes, you'll see it animate out at the speed that it's rendering. And we're done. Opening up our file explorer, there's a folder called 0, 1, and 2. This is where your dynamic renders are saved out to. So here's when our value was set to 0 and our dynamic index, when that was set to 0, this is the GIF or GIF. There it is. You can go to 1, double click that, and there's our second one. And let's go back to 2. This should be the YouTube one. Beautiful. So you've just done 3 animations for the price of 1. Well, thank you for joining me on this tutorial. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions or requests for me, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. Give me a thumbs up or subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of thing. And I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.